How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is PSReady, my channel all about PlayStation. And in this video, we've got three news topics to cover, starting out with Sony saying that PS Plus is doing fine right now, but price increases will probably happen again. Then we got to talk about how the PS5 finally overtook the PS4 and why that's a good thing. And finally, we get to talk about why Sony isn't scared of the Switch 2. So yeah, let's jump into the first news story here because this one's kind of interesting. So PlayStation Plus has always been a weird thing. It started out as a great service, right? In the PS3 days, if you guys weren't there, it was $50 a year, which was a pretty good deal. And all it really gave you was extra discounts on the PlayStation Store. So if you were someone who bought a lot of digital games like me back in the day, because that was when indie games and downloadable games really started to rise in popularity, it was a great deal because you'd pay $50 up front and you'd very quickly make that back and save more money over that $50 because you would get such insane discounts all the time. It wasn't just exclusive sales for PlayStation Plus, but whenever Sony ran a sale, you'd get a pretty decent discount if you weren't subbed to PS Plus, which was cool. But if you had PlayStation Plus, you got an extra discount on top that actually brought it to a pretty dirt cheap price. I mean, even at the PS4 launch, when they were still doing the extra discount for PS Plus users, when they were still trying to convince people that it was something worth having, even though you needed it to play online on the PS4, you could get games relatively new. Like the year that Assassin's Creed Syndicate, Mad Max, Metal Gear Solid 5, and Need for Speed came out, I'm pretty sure it was 2015. That fall sale they did right around Halloween, I remember getting Mad Max for like $7. I got Assassin's Creed Syndicate for $8. I got Need for Speed 2015, the full remake of the game, for $6 or $7. Like, you could get games that were brand new, dirt cheap, just by having PlayStation Plus, and that was awesome. Then, of course, with the PS4, like I just mentioned, they made it something you needed to access online. Thanks for that one, Xbox, because that sucks. It also infected Nintendo. You have to pay for Nintendo Switch Online now, and it's like a totally inferior service. And then once again, because of Xbox and Game Pass, it evolved into this thing where they're not really fully committed to making it amazing. They just have it because Xbox did it and saw moderate success at launch, where you can get PS Plus Essential, you can get Extra with the extra library of games, and then if you want some classics every month and game streaming to be included, you can pay a lot of money for PS Plus Premium. So it's just a revenue driver for them, where at the very least you're going to give them what, like $80 a year for PS Plus Essential, and then if you can get some deal like upgrade your PS Plus Essential to Extra for a cheap price, or get premium because you want to play classic games, that's just extra money in their pocket, and it seems to be going well. As far as PS Plus Essential goes, I mean, if you're the right kind of person who really religiously follows it, I think you've probably gotten good value out of it, because there's some good games that show up on there, right? Like God of War 2018 was a PS Plus game. The Last of Us Part 1 is a PS Plus game. I think they've gotten sneakier with it, where once we got PS Plus Extra, instead of putting a huge game like God of War Ragnarok on there, for example, even though that was on there, this is falling apart, but like, they put games in the extra library instead of giving you them permanently on PS Plus Essential. And then there have been a few games that have been in Essential that have gotten PS5 upgrades that they don't give to you for free unless you buy the game. The main one being Days Gone Remastered that I remember in recent memory. So it's all just kind of a mess, but even with the mess kind of accounted for, I think if you're someone who does not like buying games at full price and doesn't need to play stuff day one, if you just play PS Plus Essential games, I think there is pretty decent value there, even with the price increases that have happened over the years. I don't know. I've always been the kind of person where I know what kind of games I like, right? Like survival horror games, I love. Sony first party single player games, I traditionally am very into, whether it's Uncharted, whether it's Bloodborne, whether it's, any game that Sony really puts out. That's something that I traditionally would be there day one for, because they've set a high bar of quality. And then when it comes to third party, I have a list of games that I like Dead Island 2. That's something I'd show up for day one. The point is, if I want to play something, I'm there day one. So while it probably would be smarter in some cases for a game that I'm like kind of just interested in, to try out, it probably would be smarter for me to just wait for it to be on PS Plus. I just don't want to deal with the hassle, so I buy them day one and I wait till I'm ready to play them. So for me, it's just never really been something I engage with at any level. Like there have been a few games that I wanted to play day one that I got lucky with, like Hotline Miami 2, that was on PS Plus day one. I can count them on one hand, but outside of that, I've never really interacted with the service all that much outside of just paying for it to get access to online gaming every time I want to boot up my PS5, which I think is worth it. And it's kind of weird when you look at the whole situation because, you know, like the biggest moneymaker I think on PlayStation right now would be Fortnite, and you don't even need PS Plus to access online in Fortnite. They kind of get people involved by giving out V-Bucks and like skin packs on PS Plus for subscribers, but like if you just want to buy a PlayStation 5 and play Fortnite, you don't got to pay for PS Plus. You could just buy the console and never pay them the yearly fee for the extra games and the online connectivity. But then Call of Duty, which is another huge game on PlayStation, that one does require PS Plus. All the sports games require PS Plus, so like they can pretty much charge you whatever they want for Essential, and you'll probably pay it if you're in the ecosystem for those games. But of course, if they increase the price too much, those people are going to fall off. They're going to say it's not worth it at this point because the games are $100. Then you got to pay $80 a year on top of that, which is the cost of a new game these days. It's just not worth it if they increase that to $100. So they're kind of kept in check by their whales. And the situation they've created by adding these extra tiers is that if they want to get a game on the service, they got to go to Namco Bandai and say, hey, we want to get Dark Souls 3 on the PS Plus extra service. Now Namco knows that they don't have to give that away for free. They say, okay, give us $1 million and we'll give it to you for 6 months and you can put it on that service. And Sony says, okay, because we want people to subscribe to PS Plus Extra, we've got to have good games, and that's just going to cost us money. So none of that is really public. The actual deals are never public, so we don't know if that's the actual number Sony pays Namco Bandai for Dark Souls 3, but I'd imagine it's not super cheap. Like it's not $1,000 or whatever to get that game on the service because, you know, even if you're not selling a ton of copies, you still are selling copies, and they got to make sure that the amount of money they get from Sony to give them the license for the extra service is more than they would make from whatever few sales they're getting for that game. And then it all funnels down to like mediocre games, right? Like if you want something on their day one and you know your game is mediocre, you're going to be like, okay, my odds of selling enough copies of this game to be profitable are up in the air enough to where if I took a flat payment from Sony to get it on the service day one, I'd probably be more profitable than if I sold the game for full price, because people are going to see my 7 out of 10 reviews. They're going to wait for the game to be cheaper anyway. So I'll take the money up front, make the game better than I probably would have with that big upfront cost of money. And, you know, maybe when the game comes out, people will still buy it to support me. So they've created a lot of different weird messes with this whole online game rental, Game Pass type service that just results in them having to raise the price every few years. So like, I'm mad about it. I don't think it's worth it for extra or premium just based on how I play, but I feel bad for people who do invest in that service and really enjoy it, and then they just get penny pinched to shit for using the service as intended, right? Like if you're someone who plays a lot of games on the extra service, at some point Sony's going to notice that you're getting too good of a deal and they're going to raise the price. So any way they slice it, you're never going to get the best deal by using these streaming services, and that's just the way it's going to go. So at the end of the day, I think it's good that they're being upfront that they have to keep the service cost competitive while also making a profit on it, which means prices will increase. So in my opinion, I wouldn't use extra or premium. Like, I think the real key to this is not playing stuff you're not super interested in day one. Obviously, like, wait for it to be cheaper. When you really get some downtime, you're looking for a new game to play, you can go to Best Buy and get a $20 copy of Dead Island 2 with all the DLC, and you'll save money at the end of the day. I think that's the smartest way, right? Like, play the stuff you know you're going to love for $70 day one, specifically Sony first party stuff, because traditionally it's been not super glitchy and actually finished. And if it's something from a third party publisher that you're like, I'd like to play that at some point, don't get PS Plus just to play it. Just wait for it to be $20, buy the disc, and then you also have a physical copy. It's like a huge win all the way around. But speaking of Sony's strategy, let's talk about how it might be working. So one of the big talking points for the past year, I've definitely talked about it a lot on this channel, is that 50% of the people who have a PlayStation 4 have not upgraded to the PlayStation 5. And obviously that's just because they had no reason to, right? Like if you're getting games on the PlayStation 4 at the same time as PS5, like there are a few outliers you have to wait a couple years for, like Jedi Survivor, so they can port it over to the console. Outside of those outliers, you've been supported by companies like Sony day one, and you've gotten a pretty decent experience. Like the resolution's a little lower, you're of course getting it locked at 30 FPS, but outside of that, you're still playing games on the console you bought over 10 years ago, and you're still enjoyed the experience, and you're paying less for it because games are 70 on PS5 and 60 on PS4. PS4. Then if you ever get a PS5, you only have to pay $10 to upgrade it in most cases. So there really hasn't been a huge reason outside of a PS4 breaking, and stupidly Sony made that console too good so they don't break all that often. So it makes sense why people haven't been upgrading to the PlayStation 5. And on another level, there haven't been that many games that really push the PS5 to its limits. When we do get games that look amazing like Expedition 33, Silent Hill 2, any game that uses Unreal Engine 5, it comes at a cost, right? Like they don't run anywhere near 60 FPS. They stutter like crazy. Silent Hill 2, which is still exclusive to the PlayStation 5, it has a PS5 Pro patch that's fucking busted, and they're like, yeah, we're working on it. How long is it going to take? All you got to do is just finish your job, Bloober team. And they're like, yeah, we'll get to it eventually. So even with the games that do support the PlayStation 5, they're not great experiences at the end of the day. So the whole point is Sony has trained people to stick with the PlayStation 4. But with all these sales they've been running, the increasing list of games that only come to the PlayStation 5, the fact that we're at the tail end of the generation, more and more people have been buying the PlayStation 5. And that's a good thing. For me personally, if you've watched the channel for years, you know I'm a staunch proponent of getting the newest hardware that you can afford. So if you can afford a PlayStation 5 Pro, it's worth it, just so you get the best performance out of any game you throw on the console. You get the ultimate greatest experience, even rivaling high-end PCs. I've always been a huge proponent of that. But if you're someone who likes to penny pinch, you're someone who likes to cost cut, you like using rewards points for your games, like I get that there hasn't been much of a reason to upgrade to the PlayStation 5, but seeing it pull ahead shows that Sony is finally doing the right thing. You know, cutting the cost of the console, giving people a good experience on PS Plus Essential at the very least, having a decent library on PS Plus Extra, all of that stuff materially shows in people upgrading to the PlayStation 5. So while I understand why people haven't upgraded, the fact that they are now shows that Sony is at least heading in somewhat of a positive direction. Summer Games Fest had Resident Evil Requiem. That's going to be a PS5 only game, so it just goes to show that when you only support one console instead of spreading your generation across 2 generations, it encourages people to upgrade their hardware, and they sell those at a profit, so they'll make more money at the end of the day. Everything has already been solved, so I don't understand why they need to reinvent the wheel constantly. Like, look at the past 4 generations of PlayStation. You know why people bought those consoles? Because you had great exclusive games. I get that you got to put games on PC now to kind of recoup the insane development costs, but like, shockingly, when you support the console that's the latest generation and you don't support the one that's the last generation, people go, oh, I should upgrade from the current generation that I'm on to the next generation. But speaking of Sony's good strategy, we know that the Switch 2 is selling like crazy, man. Like they sold 3.5 million units in their launch weekend, which is absolutely insane. That's the best launch weekend for any console ever. Listen to that, Phil Spencer, the guy who's always saying, oh, the traditional console is dead. Nintendo releases a new traditional console, breaks every record under the sun on its first launch week. So like, yeah, stop putting stock into what Xbox says, because once again, they're wrong as usual. But obviously the investor call being right after that insane launch weekend, you know, getting beat by the Nintendo Switch 2 doesn't look good to the investors. They asked Sony what was up. I love Hideaki Nishino's response where he just straight up says, look, if you want a good TV experience, you're going to buy a PlayStation 5. It's cool that the Switch 2 can run Cyberpunk 2077 and drop to 22 FPS. PS5 runs it at a lock 60 at basically 4K, even though we're using upscaling. And just compare the footage. If you want a good TV experience for games that aren't Mario Kart, Donkey Kong Bonanza, Super Mario Wonder, and every Switch first party game, you're gonna buy a PlayStation 5. And, you know, they kind of teased that they are working on a handheld to kind of compete with the Switch 2. I expect that handheld to blow the Switch 2 out of the water when it comes to performance. The fact of the matter is, people who buy the Switch 2 want to play first party Nintendo games, and those are never going to be on PlayStation. People who buy PlayStation hardware want to play PlayStation games, and the core games are not going to be on Nintendo hardware. That's just how it's going to be, because that's how it's always been. It's just bizarre to me that Sony is so smart with Nintendo, where they're like, yeah, you know, they're doing good, but it's because of their first party games. So we're going to reinvest in our first party games and just rely on the fact that if people want a good TV experience, for now, they're going to buy a PlayStation 5. If they want a handheld, we're supporting them now with the PS Portal. We're going to support them in the future with the new handheld. Everything is all figured out as it should be. But then when Xbox is like, oh, we need Game Pass, we're going to stop supporting consoles because people are not growing in the console space. They're all going to PC and mobile. So we need to buy mobile companies like Activision. Sony gets scared scared and copies them. They need the energy that they have with Nintendo where they're like, yeah, they're doing their thing. We're going to do our thing. They need that for Xbox because every time Sony chases Xbox tail, it's worse for us consumers, man. Like, I feel like I'm the only person saying this, but it's right in front of everybody. So yeah, Sony, good job not letting the Switch 2 launch affect you. Have that energy with Xbox, and I think you will continue to dominate and even dominate more than you already are. I think they're doing a good job, honestly. Like, you know, like some missteps with Xbox, that's fine because they're doing so good in everything else. There's really not that much to complain about if you're a PlayStation gamer. They're giving you good hardware, they're giving you good games. The extra stuff is just noise. Anyway, guys, as always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching and shape on.